now we're on lesson number 6, Sign Language 101. Wow, we've really flown through, haven't we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now lesson 6. Who am I? Dr. Byron Bridges. In this lesson, we'll be learning about people and the body. Clothes, numbers 51 through 60. Oh yes, and there'll be some language tips. I'll throw in some deaf culture. Of course, there'll be the quiz and vocabulary, yes. But before we get into that, let me answer a question that a lot of students have asked me in the past. And they say, deaf people marry each other, right? Well, yes, that's true. A lot of deaf people do. Well, let me ask, does that mean if two deaf people marry, they'll have deaf children? No, not necessarily. That's not always true. And in fact, most deaf couples have hearing children. Now let's look at my situation, for example. My parents are deaf. Now my sister, who's the oldest, she's profoundly deaf. So I'm the second born, and I'm hard of hearing. So that's fine. We were raised in a deaf family. So I've gotten married, and I've had my children. Now wouldn't you know it, they're all hearing. So we'll see with my grandchildren, and their children, and their children. But that's not to say that there aren't some deaf couples that have very strong deaf gene. That's usually not the case. A lot of deaf couples have hearing children. Now, are you ready for some vocabulary? Me too. Let's go. Man. Woman. Father. Mother. Grandfather. Grandmother. Son. Daughter. Husband. Wife. Brother. Sister. Family. Parents. Uncle. Aunt. Nephew. Niece. Cousin. People. Person. Gentleman. Lady. Boy. girl, child, children, kid, twins, adult, baby, friend, neighbor, bachelor, individual, boss, ancestors, sweetheart, engaged, marriage, body, head, brain, face, hair, beard, lips, tongue, teeth, nose, eyes, ears, neck, back, arms, hands, legs, feet, let's work on our numbers. 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, and 60. Whew. Great job. Keep practicing. Language tips. Just letting you know. I want to talk about the difference between masculine and feminine sides. If the sign is below the eyes, it's feminine. If it's above the eyes, it's masculine. So that's a good tip to remember. For example, aunt, below the eyes. Uncle, above the eyes. Grandfather, above the eyes. Grandmother, below the eyes. So you see the difference. Remember, if it's below the eyes, it's feminine. Above the eyes, it's masculine. Just letting you know. Clothes. Skirt. Pants. Button. Zipper. Pocket. Hat. Belt. Luggage. Gloves. Umbrella. Sweater. Shirt. Coat. Blouse. Pajamas. Shoes. Boots. Slippers. Sandals. Socks. And now it's time for some deaf culture, as I share some perspective. Let's talk about deafness. How do people become deaf? That's a common question. And there's different ways people become deaf. There isn't just one specific way. So I'll give you a general idea. One common way is people are just born genetically deaf, and it's passed down through family members. And that was the case from my parents to me, and I've passed it to my children, who'll pass it to theirs, and it will carry on that way. A second way, some people are born hearing, and they become deaf. They have an illness, or some people actually were born, especially in the 1950s and 60s, rubella and measles. that cause deafness in a lot of people. A third way, people are born hearing, and then later in life, that hearing declines. And so that really is a general explanation of how people become deaf or lose their hearing in life. Now, the word deaf, what does it mean? Does it mean everybody can't hear at all? Well, no. There's still some people that have some type of hearing loss, but they still identify themselves as deaf. Let's use me, for example. When I was born, I was born into a deaf family. I thought like a deaf person. My mother and father signed, and I learned my language from them. So I was raised with that identity. I'm a deaf person. But you see, my mother and father looked at me and said, oh, he has some hearing, so he must be a hearing child. And in fact, they put me into a regular hearing school. And it wasn't until later on that the teacher realized, yeah, he has some type of hearing loss. They went and scheduled a hearing screening test and labeled me as hard of hearing. So at that point, they moved me into a deaf school. So that was my situation back then. Oh, today's technology is much different. As soon as children are born, now it's required to take a hearing test. And that's great because it really encourages that language development at an early age. So if you're wondering, how do people become deaf? Really, there is no exact answer as to how a person became deaf. It could vary between the age they became deaf and they were hearing and now they don't hear as much. Don't be afraid to ask. It's not considered rude or offensive to ask. Deaf people will always be happy to answer the question. They'll either explain, oh, I was born deaf, or oh, I could hear until I was 2, and then something happened, or I became deaf later in life. But just to let you know, usually people that become deaf later in life, they usually don't identify themselves as deaf people. They don't like that word or that term. They prefer hearing loss. So that is one thing you have to be careful about. You can't label everybody as deaf because really those 3 groups of deafness are not really the same. They all have different perspectives on how they view themselves. So it's okay to ask, how did you lose your hearing? And if they answer later in life, then you know hearing impaired might be more appropriate. And it is a good question. A lot of times deaf people are very happy to share that information. It's a good conversation. Wow. Learning and learning, getting better. We've talked about people, the body, clothes, numbers 51 through 60. Goodness, keep working at it and go back to the beginning. Work on those numbers specifically. And don't forget the signs. Keep at it, keep working, and that practice will help you in the long run. You'll be a great signer. So I'm getting ready. We have lesson 7 coming up right around the corner. Keep at it, keep working. I promise you, you're going to be great if you keep at it. I'm looking forward to it, so work with me. I'll see you in lesson 7.